You know, sometimes, you hear these wild stories in movies about betrayal, about people you love turning against you in the most unthinkable ways. And you think, that could never happen to me. You think you're smart, you're careful, you've built something solid. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for the icy realization that the two people you trusted most in this world have been meticulously plotting to destroy you for years. My name is Mark. I'm 43 now, and for a long time, I genuinely thought I had it all figured out. I ran a successful skincare studio in downtown Austin, the kind of place where high-end clients paid premium prices for consultations and treatments. Business was booming. We had 2 locations, and I was pulling in close to $500,000 annually. My wife, Jessica, and I had been married for 16 years. We had 2 incredible daughters, Chloe, who was 14, and Lily, 11. From the outside, we were the quintessential American family: white picket fence, a nice SUV in the driveway, annual family trips to Maui. The whole package. But, like they say, things that look too perfect often are. It all started so subtly, with things you'd normally just brush off. My younger brother, Daniel, had gone through a messy divorce about 8 months before everything really began to unravel. His ex-wife, Sarah, had left him, taking their child, and Daniel was playing the victim card hard. He'd show up at our house 3, sometimes 4 times a week, always looking for a shoulder to cry on. Jessica was sympathetic. Maybe a little too sympathetic, looking back. She'd make him dinner, and they'd talk for hours while I was still at the studio handling late appointments. I thought I was being a good brother, giving him space, letting my wife be the supportive sister-in-law. I was working 60-hour weeks back then, trying to get that second location off the ground, so I honestly didn't think much of it when I'd come home at 9 p.m. and Daniel's car would still be there. The first real warning sign, the one that snagged my attention, came on a Tuesday night in March. I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom and noticed the distinct glow of Jessica's phone under the covers. She was texting someone, and the moment she heard me shift, she locked the screen so fast it was almost aggressive. I asked who she was talking to at 2 in the morning, and she snapped back, "It's my sister, having a crisis." I accepted it because, well, what else was I supposed to do? Accuse my wife of lying without proof? But that gut feeling, you know, that little whisper that something is off, it was there. After that, I started noticing other things. She changed her phone passcode, something she'd never done in 16 years of marriage. She started going to the gym at odd hours, coming back with her hair completely dry. Small inconsistencies that, individually, meant nothing. But put them all together, and they started painting a picture I really didn't want to see. Then came the slip-up that changed everything. I was helping Lily with her homework one evening, and she casually mentioned that Uncle Daniel had brought them McDonald's for lunch the previous Saturday. That was weird. I'd been at a conference in Dallas that weekend, and Jessica had told me she'd taken the girls to her mom's place. I didn't confront anyone immediately. I just filed it away in my mental folder of strange occurrences. I started paying closer attention to schedules, to patterns. Daniel's visits always seemed to coincide with my business trips or late nights at work. And the home security cameras we'd installed 2 years prior? They'd mysteriously stopped recording around the time Daniel's divorce was finalized. Jessica said they were broken, that she'd call someone to fix them. But weeks passed, and nothing happened. The breaking point arrived from an unexpected source. Our neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, the sweet 70-year-old lady who lived across the street, mentioned in passing that she'd seen Jessica and Daniel having coffee at that little cafe downtown, the one near the art museum. She said they looked very cozy, very comfortable together. She didn't say it with malice, just making conversation, but the way she paused before saying cozy told me she'd noticed something, too. That evening, I brought it up casually over dinner. I said, "Mrs. Henderson mentioned seeing you and Daniel at the cafe." I watched Jessica's face carefully. For just a second, maybe half a second, I saw panic flash across her features before she smoothed it into annoyance. She went off on me, her voice rising, "You're acting like a jealous teenager. This is ridiculous." She told me Daniel was family, and she was just being supportive during his difficult time. The defensiveness was overwhelming, completely disproportionate to what should have been a simple explanation. That night, lying in bed next to a woman I'd loved for 16 years, I realized I was living with a stranger. The perfect life I'd built, the family I'd worked so hard to provide for, it was all constructed on a foundation that was quietly crumbling beneath me. I didn't know the full extent of what was happening yet. I didn't know about the planning, the scheming, the sheer calculated cruelty of what they'd been doing behind my back. But I knew enough to understand that nothing would ever be the same again. And the worst part? I had no idea how deep this betrayal actually went, or how much deeper it was about to get. I spent the next 3 weeks in this weird state of hyper-awareness, like I was watching my own life from outside my body. I didn't confront Jessica again after that blow-up about the cafe. I just started documenting everything. I'm a detail-oriented guy, comes with running a business. So, I created a private, encrypted folder on my laptop and started logging dates, times, inconsistencies. Every time Daniel's car was in the driveway when I got home, every time Jessica's story didn't quite add up, every weird excuse about the broken security cameras. I was building a case without even knowing what the full crime was yet. The breakthrough came during a business trip to Portland that I'd scheduled for late April. It was supposed to be a 3-day conference, but I got food poisoning the second night and caught an early flight home. I didn't tell Jessica I was coming back early. I just grabbed an Uber from the airport straight to our house around 11 p.m. on a Thursday. Daniel's car wasn't in the driveway. The house was dark except for our bedroom light. I used my key quietly, walked upstairs, and what I found wasn't them in bed together, like you'd expect from a typical cheating story. No, what I found was somehow worse. Jessica's iPad was on the kitchen counter, unlocked, open to her photo gallery. I don't know why I looked. Maybe instinct, maybe divine intervention, but I started scrolling. There were hundreds of photos I'd never seen before. Pictures of her and Daniel at restaurants I'd never been to, at hotels I didn't recognize, intimate shots that made my stomach churn. But it wasn't just affair photos. There were screenshots of text conversations going back almost 2 years. They'd been planning this. Really planning it. Messages about timing their meetups around my schedule, discussions about how to manipulate our daughters into keeping secrets, even jokes about how oblivious I was. I found one message from Daniel that made me sick to my core. It said, he's so busy building his little empire, he doesn't even notice his own house is burning down, with a laughing emoji. My own brother wrote that. I should have lost it right there. Should have thrown the iPad through the window, confronted them, made a scene. But something cold and calculating took over instead. I connected the iPad to my laptop and started transferring everything. Every photo, every message, every piece of evidence. While files were copying, I kept digging through her apps. That's when I found the folder labeled Legal Documents, and my blood went ice cold. There were scanned copies of psychiatric evaluation templates, blank ones, ready to be filled out. There were notes in Jessica's handwriting about my erratic behavior and mood swings that never happened. There was a draft email to a lawyer discussing options for involuntary psychiatric commitment and asset protection during a mental health crisis. They weren't just having an affair. They were building a legal framework to have me declared mentally incompetent. The plan was there in black and white, documented like a business proposal. They'd manufacture a psychiatric emergency, get me committed for evaluation, and while I was locked up, unable to defend myself, they'd move assets, close accounts, take control of my business. Daniel had even researched Texas laws about mental health holds, how long they could keep someone detained for evaluation, what paperwork was needed. My wife and my brother had spent 2 years not just betraying me, but constructing an elaborate legal trap to steal everything I'd built. I finished copying everything, put the iPad back exactly where I found it, and went upstairs. Jessica was asleep in our bed, peaceful as could be. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching her, wondering how someone could sleep so soundly while plotting to destroy another person's life. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my home office, going through every file I'd copied, understanding the full scope of what they'd planned. Around 6 a.m., I heard her alarm go off, heard her get up, and start her normal morning routine. I went downstairs, made coffee, and when she came into the kitchen, I kissed her good morning like nothing was wrong. She asked how Portland was, and I lied smoothly, told her it was productive, that I'd learned a lot. She smiled and said she was glad that she'd missed me. The casual cruelty of it was almost impressive. I kept up the act for 2 more weeks while I did my own research and planning. I reached out to Sarah, Daniel's ex-wife, through a mutual friend. We met at a coffee shop in a different part of town, and she confirmed everything I'd suspected and more. She told me Daniel was a pathological liar, that he'd cheated throughout their marriage, that he'd tried to manipulate her into signing away rights to their son during the divorce. She said he'd always been jealous of me, of my success, that he'd made comments for years about how I didn't deserve what I had. She apologized for not warning me sooner, said she'd tried to cut all ties and move on. I told her it wasn't her fault, that I was grateful she was willing to talk to me. Now, with Sarah's information and my own evidence, I started putting together a counter-strategy. I'm not a lawyer, but I know how to research, how to plan, how to execute. I went back through our home network logs and found that Daniel had been accessing our Wi-Fi for months, probably syncing his own devices to coordinate with Jessica. I installed monitoring software on our router, completely legal since I own the network, and suddenly I could see every website they visited, every cloud service they accessed. I got into Jessica's iCloud account using an old password she'd recycled. And since I still had access to her recovery email that I'd set up years ago when we first got iPhones, I was able to bypass the 2-factor authentication without her knowing. Inside, I found even more evidence: calendar appointments labeled Jim that corresponded with hotel bookings, shared documents with Daniel about our future together, with multiple exclamation points, like they were planning a fun vacation instead of destroying a family. The most damning thing I found was a voice memo on her phone from 3 weeks earlier. It was Jessica and Daniel discussing their timeline, how they needed to move faster because I was starting to ask questions. Daniel's voice on the recording said something that made my blood run cold: "We just need one good incident, one public breakdown, and we can get him committed for 72 hours minimum. That's plenty of time to get the paperwork filed." And Jessica agreed. Said she'd been documenting my supposed erratic behavior for months. They talked about my business like it was already theirs. Discussed which properties to sell first, how to liquidate my retirement accounts. They planned everything down to which lawyers to use, which doctors would sign off on psychiatric evaluations without asking too many questions. I saved everything to multiple encrypted drives, uploaded copies to secure cloud storage, and made sure I had backups of backups. Every night, I came home and played the devoted husband, helped the girls with homework, had family dinners where I smiled and laughed while sitting across from 2 people who were actively plotting my destruction. It was the hardest acting job of my life. But I needed time to prepare my own plan. Because I realized something important during those weeks of pretending. I wasn't interested in just exposing them or getting a divorce. They tried to trap me in a cage of their own making, tried to steal my sanity, my freedom, my life's work. So, I decided I wasn't going to just escape their trap. I was going to burn the whole thing down around them and walk away while they dealt with the ashes. The cold part was how calm I felt about it. How clear everything became once I understood the full picture. They'd made their choice. Now, I'd make mine, and mine would be permanent. The thing about revenge is that it works best when nobody sees it coming. I spent 6 weeks preparing my exit strategy while maintaining the perfect facade of the oblivious husband. During that time, I quietly restructured everything they thought they'd steal. I transferred ownership of my skincare studios to a trust I'd established in Delaware years before I even met Jessica. Moved most of my liquid assets to secure investment accounts in the Cayman Islands that I'd opened during a business expansion phase she didn't know about. And converted our joint investments into cryptocurrency wallets and private equity holdings that I physically secured in a safety deposit box at a bank she'd never heard of. Every move was legal, every transaction documented properly with proper reporting to the IRS, because unlike them, I wasn't planning to break any laws. The house was trickier since Texas is a community property state. But I'd been smart when we bought it. Back when I started my first studio, I created an LLC for asset protection. And that LLC technically owned our house. Jessica had never paid attention to the paperwork, just signed where I told her to sign, thinking it was standard business stuff. So, legally, I didn't need her permission to sell an asset owned by my business entity. I discovered through county records that our property had some serious foundation issues the previous owner never disclosed. Issues that would cost nearly $200,000 to fix properly. I hired an independent inspector who confirmed the problems, got everything documented, then quietly listed the house through the LLC with a real estate agent in San Antonio. I priced it to sell fast, accepted an all-cash offer from an investment company, and scheduled closing for exactly 2 weeks out. While I was dismantling our shared life piece by piece, I was also building their destruction. Remember all those files I'd copied from Jessica's iPad? Turns out Daniel had been running some questionable side businesses that he'd carefully hidden from everyone. Shell companies registered in Montana, LLCs with vague purposes, money moving between accounts in patterns that looked an awful lot like tax evasion and money laundering. I compiled everything into a neat package complete with bank statements I'd obtained through the monitoring software, transaction records, and communications between him and Jessica about moving money. Then I sent it all anonymously to the IRS, the Texas Department of Revenue, and for good measure, the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I also reached out to some of Daniel's former business partners, people he'd screwed over during deals. I didn't have to do much, just pointed them toward public records and let them discover on their own how he'd been hiding assets during his divorce from Sarah. Turns out, when you lie to a family court about your finances, people get really angry about it. Within days, Sarah's lawyer had filed motions to reopen the divorce settlement, and Daniel suddenly had legal problems multiplying faster than he could handle. The morning I executed my plan was a regular Tuesday in June. I woke up early, made breakfast for the girls one last time, and drove them to school like normal. I hugged them longer than usual, told them I loved them more than anything in the world, and watched them walk into the building without knowing it would be months before I'd see them again. That part hurt more than anything else. Worse than the betrayal, worse than losing my brother. But I knew if I stayed, I'd end up in a psychiatric facility with my assets stripped and my reputation destroyed. Sometimes you have to lose a battle to win the war. I went to the bank, withdrew $50,000 in cash, transferred another $200,000 to my secure offshore account, and cleaned out the safety deposit box. I stopped by my skincare studios and had brief meetings with my managers. Told them I was taking an extended sabbatical for health reasons and activated the management structure I'd already put in place. Everything would run fine without me. They just didn't know I wasn't planning to come back anytime soon. Then I drove home one last time. The house was empty. Jessica was at her yoga class that wasn't really a yoga class. Probably meeting Daniel at whatever hotel they were using that week. I packed 2 suitcases with essentials, grabbed my passport and the documents I needed, and left 4 envelopes on the kitchen counter. One for Jessica, one for Daniel, one for my lawyer with instructions to file divorce papers immediately, and one sealed envelope addressed to both Chloe and Lily, marked, "Open this when you're ready to know the truth." Each adult envelope contained copies of everything I'd found, every photo, every message, every piece of their plan to destroy me. The girl's letter was different. I'd written it by hand, explained that I loved them more than life itself, that I was leaving to protect myself and ultimately to protect them from being caught in the middle of something ugly, and that when they were old enough to understand, all the evidence would be waiting for them. The note I left for Jessica and Daniel was simple, just 8 words written in black marker on white paper, *I know everything. Good luck with what's coming, *. I drove straight to Austin International Airport and caught a flight to Bogota, then connected to Lisbon. By the time Jessica found the envelopes and realized what had happened, I was 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, sipping scotch and feeling lighter than I had in years. I'd left my phone in a trash can at the airport after sending one final email to my lawyer authorizing him to proceed with everything. Over the next 3 months, I watched from Costa Rica as everything unfolded exactly as I planned. The IRS audit hit Daniel first, froze all his accounts, seized his assets. The financial crimes investigation expanded to include Jessica since she'd been part of several of his shell companies. Her name was on documents. She'd signed paperwork. She was in deep whether she realized it or not. The house sale went through. The money went into escrow for divorce proceedings that Jessica couldn't stop because she was too busy dealing with federal investigators. Her little boutique consulting business collapsed when clients found out she was under investigation. Chloe and Lily went to live with Jessica's mother. And according to my lawyer, they were angry at me, confused about why I'd abandoned them, believing whatever story their mother had told them about my sudden disappearance. That hurt worse than anything, but I knew it was temporary. I knew the truth would come out eventually. Daniel got arrested 4 months after I left. Wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and about 6 other charges I can't even remember. Last I heard, he took a plea deal for 8 years in federal prison. Jessica avoided criminal charges but lost everything in the divorce. The house money went mostly to legal fees and tax penalties, and she had to declare bankruptcy. Her lawyer tried to argue I'd hidden assets, but everything I'd done was legal and properly documented. The LLC ownership of the house was legitimate. The offshore accounts were properly reported, and the prenup we'd signed before marriage held up perfectly in court. About 7 months after I left, I got an email from Chloe. It was short, angry, full of words like abandonment and coward. She said I destroyed their family, that their mom was struggling, that everyone at school knew about the scandal. I didn't respond right away. Just sent her a simple message, I left you a letter. When you're ready to read it, you'll understand. I love you both, Dad. Another 5 months passed before I heard from her again. This time, the email was different. She turned 16, found the sealed envelope I'd left, and read it with Lily. She'd also, apparently, demanded to see all the divorce paperwork, all the evidence. Her second email started with, "Oh my God, Dad," and continued with apologies, tears expressed through text, and disbelief at what their mother and uncle had planned. She said they tried to protect me by deleting security footage when their mom asked, thinking they were helping with some kind of surprise, not realizing they were helping cover up an affair. She said she felt sick about it, that Lily was devastated, that they both wanted to talk to me. We started video calling weekly after that. I showed them evidence when they asked for it. Answered their questions honestly but carefully. Never badmouthed their mother, despite everything. Just let the facts speak for themselves. They were old enough to process it. Old enough to understand that sometimes the people you love make terrible choices. By the time they graduated high school, we'd rebuilt something real, something honest. 2 years after I left, I came back to the States for a week to handle some final business paperwork and to see the girls in person. We met in Boulder, spent 3 days together, cried a lot, laughed some too, and started properly healing. On my last day before flying back to Costa Rica, I was having coffee at a diner near my old neighborhood when I saw her. Jessica was working there, wearing a name tag and a polyester uniform, taking orders, clearing tables. She'd aged 10 years in too. Her hair was different, cheaper, cut short and simple, and she had this defeated look that made her seem small and tired. She saw me, froze with a coffee pot in her hand, and for a moment, I thought she might run. Instead, she walked over to my table slowly, like someone approaching a wild animal. She asked quietly if she could sit down, and I said, sure. She apologized. Said she knew it didn't mean anything now, but she was sorry for everything, that she destroyed her own life chasing something that was never real. She said Daniel had manipulated her, made her believe they could have this perfect life together if they just got rid of me, that she'd been stupid and selfish and blinded by something she couldn't even explain. She said losing the girl's trust was worse than losing everything else combined. I listened without saying much, just let her talk, watched her hands shake as she twisted a napkin into pieces. Then I told her something I'd been thinking about for 2 years. I said I didn't destroy her life, that she'd done that herself the moment she decided to betray someone who loved her. I told her the consequences she was facing weren't my revenge. They were just reality catching up to choices she'd made. I told her I'd forgiven her, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I finished my coffee, left a $100 tip with a note that said, "For who you used to be," and walked out. I never saw her again. These days, I live in Costa Rica, run my business remotely through my management team, and sleep better than I ever did in that big house in Austin. The girls visit me twice a year. We're building something better than what we had before. Something based on honesty instead of comfortable lies. Sometimes people ask if I regret how I handled it. If I wish I tried to work things out or taken the high road. The answer is no. Not even a little bit. They tried to cage me, tried to steal my sanity and my freedom, and I burned their world down instead. But more than that, I got my daughters back. I got my peace back, and I got my life back on my own terms. And honestly, I'd do it exactly the same way again. What do you think about this story?